and we must do our work without fear, favor or prejudice. And Section 3 will refer to issues like all organs of state must take all legislative and other measures to assist us in terms of ensuring our independence, ensuring our impartiality, ensuring our dignity, which we think is very important, and the effectiveness of the CRL Commission in this particular situation. And that we report and we're accountable to the National Assembly, and that we need to report there at least once a year. That's what the Constitution says about who we are and what we're supposed to be doing. We'll say as we move along why we're referring to this. And then as far as the CRL Rights Act, which I think all of you have, if you can look at Section 5, for instance, 1 and E, it outlines exactly what it is supposed to be happening here. You all have the are there. If you can check 5.1E, we're allowing you to read at your leisure so that you understand, and when you write, you can be we're talking about, investigate and research any issue concerning any matter affecting cultural, religious, and linguistic communities. We're there to report on any issue concerning the rights of religious and linguistic communities, which in this instance we've done. We've reported on it. And if you go down, say we must receive, we must send the appropriate of state regulation on rights to communities, and we have made to that effect. And if you move on to I, it will tell you where J, K, says we must bring any relevant matter to the attention of the appropriate authority or organ of state.
Our live press briefing, break in transmission. Let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll continue.
National many sections that I want to refer you to, because you see that you already have the thing, and you'll see why page 16, section 24, part 5, the National Conference. It's very critical because it has to do. I'm sure you've seen it, especially religious leaders are saying they're waiting for the National Consultative Conference. And what we're saying is that the CRL Act is very prescriptive about what we can do with the National Consultative Conference. We will be referring to the National Consultative Conference, and that particular in terms of how the National Consultative Conference should be structured as far as the CRL Rights Act is concerned. And one of the recommendations from Parliament is that we must convene a National Consultative Conference and you've got their recommendations in your packs. We're hoping that it is a reference to the section 25 in terms of that part 5. You will see as we refer to it later on. Sections of part 5 are very important. But we're also saying there's the section 41, which declares what is a violation in terms of it is an offense to do certain things as far as the CRL is concerned. And we'll be referring specifically to 41(1)(c) because we feel it's important for the nation to know that if you do anything calculated to influence the commission or a committee of the commission improperly in its consideration of a matter, it's a violation of the Act, and it is an offense, and Section 41 unpacks what needs to happen when that happens. We want to explain to you properly what processes were followed so that there's an understanding as to what is this thing that these people did after our investigation and after our long process of consultations with the sector, with communities, with traditional leaders, with a whole range of people. We then sent out our final report to Parliament as outlined in the legislation. On the 27th of June, we ran a workshop in Parliament to explain to the parliamentarians what this report is all about, what we've gone through, what we've discovered, where the red flags are, and where we think there could be problems. Part of what we red flagged that day was that the issue of the 7 angels, we knew even at that point that something horrible would happen there if nothing was done to monitor them or fast-track legislation where their peers could look into that thing and tell us whether that's a church or a cult or whatever was happening there. We knew something was happening in Ngcobo there, and we had no powers to deal with it. We could only rely on the legislation being fast-tracked to enable other religious leaders to go in there and say, okay, this is normal, no, this is very much out of the ordinary. We need to disable these people from doing what they were doing. Part of what we're very much alarmed with was that people were selling their worldly goods, cashing in their pensions, emptying their bank accounts, taking their cars and everything that they owned, taking their children to go live there in the church. And when we met with these people, the angels, they clearly told us that they don't believe in education. No one should go to school. No one should work. They must sit here and wait for something to happen. We knew even at that point that the money will eventually run dry. And when the money runs dry, we knew there was going to be a problem. And that problem will be of insurmountable levels where we'll all be shocked. And we raised this, that there are an accident waiting to happen, there are a time bomb, there are a situation where you know when it explodes, it's going to explode a lot. Some of the journalists who are here were here when we launched our report, and we raised these issues even with the journalists, that the Ngcobo situation is very dangerous. And we then, after that, can you go back? After that, we looked at, because there were always doubts, we knew the people who were championing this thing of rights of religious leaders, that they were querying the constitutionality of regulating practitioners, not the religion. We never ever proposed that the religion must be regulated. We said everyone who has a profession or a trade or a career is free to choose any of those as per the Constitution. But the Constitution further says, however, they may be regulated. And all we've ever said was that there must be a regulatory framework that will stop places like Ngcobo from happening, where peers will say, this is a cult, it's not a church, shut it down. Disable the angels or the pastors and say to them, no, you can't continue like this. We are no longer one of us. Shut this thing down, let's go home. Professor Ngcobo was one of the experts we used in terms of, as a constitutional expert. I'm sure some of you know him. He presented a paper to Parliament on the 27th of June 2017, outlining the constitutionality of what we're putting on the table, so that it's not us saying this thing is constitutional. We allow the constitutional expert to guide and to say, yes, we've looked and interrogated this thing, we've looked at the Constitution, we've looked at their recommendations. They are within the Constitution and the law. They are not violating any of those. There were a number of religious organizations that we took to Parliament, including the SABC, which is the biggest church in this country. And we took a lot of other formations with us to Parliament, which are umbrella organizations that said, yes, although it's uncomfortable, but something needs to be done, including the Rhema Church, who were saying, although it would be uncomfortable to go through this, but they're in support that something needs to happen, some regulatory framework must be put in place, because they were also aware that this is getting out of hand. So we had a very tight group of umbrella organizations that we went to Parliament with, who were physically in Parliament. The gospel musicians were there. Utebuko is here today to say they're in support of this thing. We need to have a framework that is going to monitor this sector to make sure that, like all other sectors, whether you're a doctor or a nurse or any profession, actually, social workers, lawyers, etc., even judges themselves, they account somewhere. If there's something wrong that a judge has done, they're dealt with by their own. So we then said, with everything that we've put on the table, we feel, of course, the religious sector, some of them, for their own reasons, will want to punch holes at the proposals. That is expected. I don't think any of us went in blindly and thought that individual pastors, individuals, prophets, etc., will gladly accept this. We need to know as a nation that we've gone on for a long time without the sector being regulated. And we should be brave as a nation and say the time has come to protect the citizens of this country. Because we felt even at that stage that if nothing happens, this thing is spiraling out of control. Anyone can start a church anytime, anywhere, call themselves whatever they want to call themselves, a prophet, a pastor, a bishop, an archbishop, anything goes in this country, unlike in other African countries. And then we're waiting for Parliament to then tell us what is the next move. For us, that was the end of the road. We're done what we're supposed to do, and we walked away. And then they invited us to come to Parliament, the Cocta Portfolio Committee, for a workshop on the 17th and 18th October. And they said to us, freedom of religion, South Africa, and other religious people have said they want to have their day in Parliament and tell parliamentarians how much they don't like this whole report and our recommendations. And we're supposed to present ourselves on that day to listen to them and to respond to them. We should note that people like Prophet Ngcobo was there as well, and of course I'm sure it's known that we're in court with him. We've laid charges against him, and well, some such people were there. And we should also state that by that time, Freedom of Religion South Africa had taken us to court precisely because in one of the TV programs, Rights and Records, when we're debating with them there, we had said if we do nothing as they are proposing, that leave the system as it is and we will monitor ourselves. I clearly said if we do nothing, people are going to die. They have taken me to court on that, to say, I dared to say, people are going to die. It's in court papers, and if you need us to supply you with those court papers, we could. So we're currently being sued for saying, if we do nothing, people are going to die. So Freedom of Religion South Africa is in court. They are suing me in particular and the CRL Rights Commission for daring to say people are going to die. In this instance, we prayed we were not right. We prayed we were wrong, and very wrong. But unfortunately, we were 100% right. We pointed where it was likely to happen, and it happened right there. And after this workshop where everybody was saying how much they dislike this whole thing that we want to do and how much it's going to affect their freedoms, then there was a meeting on 30th January 2018 where the Cocta Portfolio Committee was deliberating on their report about the hearings that they've held in Parliament about our report and our recommendations. So on 30 January, we were also invited to come to Parliament to deliberate. Now, they were deliberating and were observers on how they are going to deal with our report. They had a draft thing at the time. And then on 14 February, the Cocta Portfolio Committee adopted the report. You'll see in the report that they've given us, that has been included in your pack. We then received the final report from the Cocta Portfolio Committee on 21 February 2018, the day of the Ngcobo massacre at the police station. We received their final report. I don't know, these things sometimes are scary coincidence. And maybe we should tell you what we did, because there have been a lot of media reports in terms of what did you do, who did what, who didn't do what with the Ngcobo situation. When you discovered this bomb ticking, what then did you do? While we're investigating, you know, the whole issue of commercialization of religion and the abuse of people's belief systems, there was a report in the media about a particular church in the Eastern Cape. I think it was an SABC, and we decided, okay, let's go and talk to these people and find out what is happening there. We had a very long session with them because we're trying to get to the bottom of this. We have posted the full interview with them It's on our website, but there are clips which you can see later on about the conversation we're having with them, which was a very strange conversation that we're having. From what they told us, it became clear that what they were preaching was a form of extremism. We thought they were extremists of one kind or another. Our report, if you look at our report on page 21, we highlighted them. We even quoted them verbatim in terms of what they were saying. They're from heaven, they were sent here by God, and they're angels, and they're Jesus' brothers, and all 7 of them choose who their mother will be and who their father will be, and they're here to catch the devil and take him back to hell, and all these people who are there waiting for their brother Jesus to come, and they're all going to go to heaven. At that point, like situation. They explained that people bring their worldly goods. Some of the people, the congregants were there, and they were telling us they willingly gave their worldly possessions. They've sold their houses. Some of them were professionals, teachers, nurses, etc., who have gone to live there in the church and have cashed in everything that they had. When you hear that, you know at some point money is going to run dry here, and when money runs dry, it's going to be problematic. We then, at that point, started saying there's something wrong here. The whole interaction made anybody wonder, what do you call such a thing in the country? We then, during that time, saw that the Eastern Cape Provincial Department of Social Development, they were removing children from the ministry. And we're very happy about this. We even issued a press statement on 17 February 2016, saying we're very happy, we're congratulating the Eastern Cape Department of Social Development for dealing with this church, for removing these children, because children are their business. And in our assessment of the situation, their major violation, if not the only violation at the time, was that children were being kept there. It was unconstitutional that children cannot attend school, that they cannot access the health systems. Some of them did not even have birth certificates because they didn't believe in those types of things, and that these children could not even be immunized because they were praying for them, so they couldn't immunize them. And they didn't need any immunization because they've got higher powers. So we're very happy when the Eastern Cape Department of Social Development were acting on this issue. It was only a week or so ago when we heard that they're saying we stopped them from doing their work. When we were so appalled, how could we stop them from removing children? And we had issued a press release, which I'm sure you can find in your files there, when we're saying we're very happy with what they are doing and they should keep up and make sure that this thing, at least children are protected, if nothing else. The reality of the situation is a lot of people, including the chairperson of the COCTA Portfolio Committee, in the past week have said there are enough laws to deal with such things in the country. We've looked at this thing. We've spoken to the police. We've spoken to the prosecutors. When adults who are of sane mind give up all their worldly goods and they go and live in a church, there are no laws that people are breaking. You can't arrest people for praying the whole day and singing the whole day. It is not illegal What they were doing there was singing and praying and dancing and doing all sorts of things that are things that in a church you do, but they may have been hiked up by 100%. But you can't arrest them. When people say there are enough laws to deal with these things, which laws were supposed to apply in Ngcobo at that particular time, before they went to the police station to kill the police? Which laws had they violated in the current arsenal of legislation? Once we start arresting people for being in a church, we will get into trouble in this country. That would be a complete violation of their freedom of religion that they say they want to protect. You can't say, why are you singing here the whole day and not going to work? It's not illegal to do that. So at that point, no one was breaking any laws. We checked and verified and looked at all angles. Everything checked out. People were there voluntarily. Actually, they brought them to us to say, we like being there, we like giving all our money to the church. It's only when you have a peer review mechanism that will then say to the seven angels, what show are you running here? Is this a church? Is this not a church? A legislated peer review mechanism would have been able to deal with them, because they would have been empowered to declare them not religious leaders anymore. And if you can license someone, you can take away the license. Their peers would have been able to say, you can't be one of us anymore if you claim all these unusual things. So, wow, withdrawing your license, you can't run a church anymore. That's when the system would have collapsed for the angels. But in the absence of any peer review mechanism, nobody could touch them. Today, if they are not arrested, and the other four angels are still alive, if that space is demolished, they can move to another space and do the same thing again. And that's what appalls us at this point. That next week they might find a new space. And there's no law that stops them from doing that. We can all monitor and hope and pray that it's not going to be duplicated somewhere else. And we know that's not their first space. They've been somewhere else before, and they were removed there in another village, and they kept moving. They were there at that point. What's going to stop them in the current legislation for the four who are left to go and open up somewhere else? Nothing. Twice we held meetings with the traditional leaders, the religious leaders, and members of the community in Ngcobo to sensitize them about what is happening in their area and what they are doing about it. Commissioner Madiba, one of our commissioners, whom you can talk to later, facilitated those meetings in the community to say there's a problem here, what is the traditional leader doing about it, because it's happening in his constituency. So we didn't just sit, we mobilized the people to say, what can you do as a traditional leader? Can't you shut down this church and say, this is your space, you don't want them to be in your space? So we did a variety of things to try and deal with them in the absence of any law that could deal with them. We warn people that this will happen. Even the people in that place know that. One of the things we want to say is that what we're hearing is there are many others like this in the country. What we would ask the media to do is to ask people to call us here at the CRL. We'll give you our landline numbers. Those that do not have the internet, to email to us at info@crlcommission.org.za to tell us about other formations like this that need to be monitored, that need to be dealt with within the law, and how we can do that is limited at this stage, but at least to make South Africa aware of what is happening out there and what might happen out there. We have put into your package the report we received from COCTA, Portfolio Committee, which we received on the 21st of February this year. They have a few observations, it's in the report, that we did not do sufficient public participation as only 85 religious organizations were invited to the hearings. What we did was to look for umbrella denominations. If you call the ZCC, they represent at least 12 million people in this country. If you call the Methodist Church, they represent millions. Anglican Church, you've got another millions. So we're not dealing with individual churches. We're dealing with bigger formations. But also this is a scientific thing. If 85 is small, you know, it's like, how long is a piece of string? What is medium, what is big? We're looking at how the representation. How many people do you represent? If you represent 12 million, we've covered a quarter of the population or a third of the population. If you represent 4 million, so it can be that only 85 religious organizations. We're not dealing with individuals and individual churches. We're dealing with big churches. Then there's the issue of the constitutionality of the CRL Rights Commission recommendations. They are saying there's disagreement over that. What we know is that we've consulted experts in the Constitution, and they've interrogated our recommendations, and they found that they are within. Well, if somebody else says they're not within, then it explains why we want to take the steps that we want to explain to you. And part of what they observed was that the religion should not be commercialized, which we agree with totally. And they also observed that denominations have been self-regulated, and this has been working well for them. We agree with that. A lot of traditional churches, missionary churches, are structured in the way that we are proposing. We're saying everyone must be accountable some way. I can't start up my church as a standalone and be accounted only to myself. If you go to the Anglican Church, they've got a system, a hierarchical system. They train you, they deploy you, they monitor you, and if you're out of order, they get rid of you. And that's all that we're asking for, is that people mustn't be standalones. You can't control me, who has opened up my church with my money when I belong to no one. So if other peers are calling me without there being legislated peer review accountability, I'll refuse to go to them. And what's the worst thing they can do to me? Absolutely nothing. So the craziness will continue unabated, and we'll find ourselves where we are right now. So it's okay to say denominations have been doing it. Yes, that's where we learned how to do this thing. We copied their system and said, it works for the Anglicans, it works for the Dutch Reformed Church, it works for all the other bigger churches. How do we make it work for individual churches, standalones? And we recommended the same methodology, that they should be part of an umbrella organization, and the umbrella organization of their choice. They will be responsible for monitoring them, they will be responsible for training them, they will be responsible for saying, you're no longer fit to be one of us. So leave this thing. We've been begging you, we've prayed, we've fasted, we've done everything for you. You can't change. So we give up on you. I'm sure they would have given up on the 7 angels if they had insisted to be angels from heaven. At some point, the umbrella organization would have stopped them. In the absence of an umbrella organization that is legislated, that will force them to be part of one umbrella organization.
Just coming out of the CRL media briefing, just for a breakaway to have a look at your headlines this hour.
Also observe that the commercialization is an infringement on the constitutional right of people, which we agree with up to a point. Because when you commercialize and you're selling water and you're selling all sorts of faith products, you could be in violation of the Income Tax Act. But I'm not sure when people voluntarily do these things and whether their freedom of religion is violated. The reality of the matter is it's a moral and ethical issue, which is very difficult to deal with. You can tax people, you can scream and shout till you drop, but when they do these things, it's only a matter of are they paying the tax correctly? If they are saying this holy water will cure you of your whatever chronic illness, well, they are not saying anything that they say that they can't back up in the holy book. They'll say, God is healing. I've prayed for this water and I've transferred the powers to the water. So when you commercialize, it's a very difficult thing that can only be dealt with by your peers, who will then guide you whether you've gone beyond the Bible or you are within the Bible and within the doctrine. They say the CRL Rights Commission is not the body that should be regulating the sector. We agree with them totally. We have no appetite for this. That's why we're saying their peers must deal with them. You can't be dealing with all religions. It's Muslims today, they're coming with the problem, it's Jewish people, it's all sorts of other people. Let them have their own peer review mechanism. Let them belong to their own umbrella organizations of their choice based on the way they worship. People from missionary churches do not work the same as charismatic churches, so they can't be in one umbrella. You need people who will understand their form of worship and a way, of doing things. So we agree with the fact that the CRL Rights Commission cannot be the people who determine such things. And we've said it in Parliament that there are many options. The peer review mechanism can be administratively located at the CRL Commission, or it can be a standalone like the lawyers have, the doctors have, and other people, and it can be established as a standalone, and it can be funded accordingly, and it can have its own systems. But that the issue of regulation is at the core. Otherwise, you have nice people who pray and hope that you'll change your ways. There needs to be a carrot and a stick situation where your peers can say you are totally out of order and we don't want to be associated with you ever again. It happens with lawyers, it happens with doctors, it happens with every other professional. What is so special about these professionals that they can be monitored from heaven? They are here now. When we get there, we'll all be judged. They'll be judged together with us. We understand from the Holy Book. We'll form a line there, and all our sins will be there. So while they're here, they must be dealt with the way we deal with other professionals here in the country. And they can't be a special offer and then say we don't want to be regulated, we want to regulate ourselves without the law coming into the discourse. We're saying they'll regulate themselves. I don't know how we can ever stress this more. Let them regulate themselves. They don't need to be located here. There'll be a burden on the CRL Commission that is already underfunded. So if they can be located in another place, in another space, but the issue of regulation. For us, we feel it's constitutional, and we feel in our mandate to protect the rights of religious communities, which is a constitutional mandate. We cannot back down. We need the rights of those people protected. And the circus has gone on long enough. We cannot waste time. We cannot find things that are nebulous and hold on to them and excuse them through the back door in terms of what they are doing. They are saying we should hold, part of their recommendations, a national consultative conference should be convened to give a platform to discuss challenges in the religious sector. We are saying we all know what those challenges are. I'm sure half the nation can write a whole book. I'm sure most journalists can write a book about what is the problem with especially Christianity. We all know what is happening. You don't need a conference to do that. You can list it. We already know. They are saying, arising from that NCC, National Consultative Conference, the following should be established. There must be a charter of self-regulation and a code of conduct. We are saying that's all well and good, but self-regulation cannot be outside the law. There must be a legal framework that governs self-regulation. And self-regulation will go hand in hand with a code of conduct like lawyers have, doctors have, and everybody else has. So it's not a new thing that we're saying there must be a code of conduct. We've already started working on the code of conduct a long time ago. So we're saying a charter without a legal framework that empowers their peers to get rid of people who are not fit for this work is critical, and it's at the core of protecting the rights of religious communities. They want to strengthen the mandate of ICASA and other such bodies to penalize misleading media claims. We agree with them totally. We've spoken to ICASA in terms of what can be done about people advertising in the newspapers, traditional leaders who promise you millions that will be brought into your house by a rat, and all sorts of togoloshe and short men who will bring you 6 million rands to your house. We all know that that won't happen, but it's in the newspapers every day. We're saying also when people say that they will, in their churches, most of the time, there are those people who say, you know, I bought this bottle of water, I was suffering from HIV and AIDS, and I'm now healed. How do you deal with what happens in a church? When people are advertising, the bulk of advertising happens in a church, and people then buy and buy and buy because somebody somewhere has said, I bought this and I was healed. So there's a lot of advertising one way or the other that happens. So we agree that something should happen, that there should be a strengthening of legislation like the Non-Profit Organization Act and the Income Tax Act to ensure registration of religious institutions. And we're saying to ensure taxation, proper taxation of religious institutions and religious practitioners. We have been talking to SARS about it, and SARS have started with their project of looking at how to tax the religious sector appropriately. We are also saying that the issue of the Non-Profit Act, NPO Act, we are saying it's not about the church. The problem is not the church, the building. The problem, it's the individuals in the church. If the Seven Angels Ministry were to register with the NPO Act, they might be registered as we speak. How does that help? Because all the NPO Act does is that, okay, you must tell us who your board members are, where you are, and what business are you in. They can register, but how will that protect people? It's the individuals. How do you get to the Seven Angels to tell you their story of being from heaven and all sorts of other things. The peers must deal with the individuals, not with the building called a church. There's nothing wrong with the building in Ngcobo and where they are, and their board members whom they can pick and choose. There's something wrong with the Seven Angels. We say this is a God-sent example because now we can give you concrete examples of why these things can't work until you get to the practitioner and you can interrogate the person himself. How do you know that people do not have a record of child abuse, child sexual abuse? There's a register. Who checks them? Who says, you appear here? I could be out of jail today for having raped children and women and could start a church tomorrow. Nothing stops me. Even if you implement all those things, NPO Act, tax, the pedophiles will still roam the church. What have we decided? We feel this is at the core of what we wanted to discuss with you today. There has been a whole range of discussions and debates where people have been quoted saying we can't go to the Constitutional Court because we are appointed by Parliament and we report to Parliament. And there have been reports that we want to take Parliament to court. Want to clarify that. We are going to go to the Constitutional Court on a declaratory order. What do we want them to help us with? We have made recommendations. At the core of those recommendations is the fact that the practitioners, not the religion, must be regulated. We must know which pastor, which reverend, which bishop is where. As a nation, we should be able to go to some website, go in and say, this is Pastor Togom Kwanas. Who is she? Where is she coming from? What is her business? And we should have access to that information. We need the individuals, not the church. We want to gun for the individual. So that's at the core of what we're saying, and that the peers must drive this thing. Senior people in that particular religion must be responsible for that process. And they say that doubting, the portfolio committee says they doubt the constitutionality of our recommendations, hence they are not looking at our recommendations. What we know for sure is that the final arbiters on whether we are constitutional or not is the Constitutional Court. So we want to go there for a declaratory order for the judges there to say to us, yes, what we are recommending is in violation of freedom of religion. And then we'll all say, okay, so what's the next step now, CRL? If they say, no, you're not in violation of any freedom in the Constitution, because freedoms have limitations, as we all know, then we'll say to Parliament, so what now? And we can't say that without that declaratory order. So we're not taking Parliament to court, we're taking our recommendations to court for the Constitutional Court judges to declare our recommendations constitutional or unconstitutional. And we need to look at the constitutionality of the process followed by all parties involved, especially the Civil Rights Commission and other parties. If we're involved in investigations and we're told that 85 is not enough, that's a procedural issue, whereas the Civil Rights Commission, our act says we must determine the methods we use. So we need them to say to us, yeah, you know, you didn't follow procedure properly, you violated the Constitution, you violated your act, and that can only be determined at that level. And that's all that we're asking them to do. Look at who has done what. This is what we did, and this is where we are now. Can you help us with what is correct and what is wrong? Because even as the Civil Rights Commission, we do this business every day. That's what we're here for. We do investigations. Almost every day we receive a complaint. Late last year, we launched our report on initiation, which the Parliament is aware of. And we're saying we're using the same method in everything that we do. We've never been queried before. We did the same thing with Ugutwala, and we submitted our report. Nobody queried how many girls did you talk to, that number was too small, etc., etc. And we're also observing the issue of the initiation bill. And we believe that issues of initiation are a spiritual, religious experience, because before a child goes to initiation, there's a lot of spirituality involved. And in African religion, it is a religious experience. But the same act is on the table of the same portfolio committee. It's part of freedom of religion. And no one is querying why it's okay for African religion, freedom of religion, not to be respected. If we're not respecting the Christian one, well, it's the same method that has been used for the other ones. People who are traditional surgeons, traditional nurses are supposed to be registering, they're supposed to be monitored, they're supposed to be removed if they're not doing the right thing. So we feel religion is religion. Religion is not Christianity. Religion is everyone's religion. We are very much aware of the fact that the same parliament has passed an act in 2007 saying traditional healers must register. Traditional healers must have a council that's going to monitor them. We use the same method. We looked at that act and we said, let's apply it even here. It's already passed by Parliament. It wasn't violating freedom of religion then. It's the same method, it's the same rights, it's African religion. And all we're saying is that for us, freedom of religion is a cut across. Whatever religion you belong to, there are no religions that are more equal than others. All religions are the same. The Constitution is very clear on that. And those other legislated situations are the same as far as we're concerned. And we're also going to be asking the Constitutional Court to look at the independence of the CRL Rights Commission, the effectiveness of our recommendations, because we can't sit here, make recommendations every day, and they are not effective. What is the situation with the recommendations that we make? Because even if we make recommendations to anyone, they are going to come back and say, we're not going to implement this thing of yours, and we are just merely recommending, and we don't need to take it seriously. So we need a declaratory order in terms of what are the powers of the CRL Rights Commission. And if the CRL Rights Commission has no powers, then we need to ask ourselves, why are we spending taxpayers' money on an institution that has no powers at all? That, their reports can be closed and we say it's final and then it's reopened and we have to go back and redo the whole thing again. It's taxpayers' money we're spending here. It's not a private institution. So we need clarity on what it is that we can do and what it is that we can't do. In a country like this one where, we're looking for funds everywhere, maybe this could be a saving. If this institution is meaningless and powerless, we should be the first people to say, then save the money. Do something else with the money, because this Chapter 9 institution has no powers whatsoever. So we're going there, we're not taking Parliament to court. We're saying the Constitutional Court must help us find answers. And that's the only place you find answers when people say, you are unconstitutional. You go there and they tell you, you are right, you are wrong. And you move on and go rework your recommendations so that we are within the Constitution. And that's all that we're saying at this point.
And you can take Parliament to court, doesn't matter.
Well, I think we all know that my 12-year-old child can take me to court, to the Constitutional Court. So that's another story for another day. Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, colleagues. Thanks. Can I just get an indication from some of you who might be wanting to get clarity or have got further questions? Please raise your hands, and if I'm obstructed by the camera, I'd like to apologize. Raise your hand, mention your name and the organization you represent. I'm going to take 5, in this first round. Let me start from this side. Okay, any question here? I think there is a hand. Yeah, at the back. Yeah.
I don't want to ask my question now because it's Sunday newspaper and it's probably going to be my only angle.
Okay, okay. Can I see there are 2 hands here? Okay.
Well, just coming there out of the CRL Rights Commission, of course, the chairperson, Toko Ngcobo.
Okay, we've noted that first question. Then the second question.
Chair, thanks so much for your time. This is Ngcobo from the SABC TV News. Obviously, the spread between you and the Parliament spokesperson, Ngcobo cannot be ignored in this press conference. I mean, he says that clearly you don't understand the legislature's constitutional mandate after you were quoted in the City Press newspaper on Saturday, saying that the Ngcobo shooting that left 13 people dead, including 5 policemen and a retired soldier, somehow should have been prevented if Parliament had taken this seriously, the recommendations seriously. So what's your take on that?
Okay, it looks like we've got those 2 questions. Oh, let me take the third one. Yeah.
Sorry, it's Ngcobo from ENCA. If I can just get clarity, is this the first time that you've ever felt powerless? Are there any other recommendations that you have put forward and you felt that they were recognized and they were implemented?
Thank you. Chair, can we... Okay, let me take the last one. Yeah.
It's Kennedy Mapanga, A97. I just wanted to know that, do you have any other churches that you're monitoring that are similar to Seven Angels, where you have the feeling now that it could possibly be another tragedy in waiting as well?
Okay, I think, Chair, we can take these ones for now.
The issue of when will be at the Constitutional Court, we've already instructed the lawyers who are instructing the council, who is drafting the papers now. So we're looking at as soon as the Constitutional Court gives us space to do this, but the papers are being drafted to take to the Constitutional Court. So we're not theorizing anymore. We're practically doing this. It's not like in 2 years' time, one day we'll do it. It's being done. So it depends on what the Constitutional Court gives us in terms of a date. As soon as the lawyers are done with drafting of the papers. The issue of the speaker, not the speaker, the spokesperson of Parliament, it's unfortunate for him to say we do not understand the constitutional mandate of Parliament. The reality of the matter is we are sticking to the Constitution and to our Act, and we made recommendations as a Chapter 9 institution that is mandated to promote and protect the rights of religious institutions, in this case, religious communities. We did what we had to do. All we're saying is that if they didn't go for the second hearings, because we had hearings, and then in October, they had hearings about our hearings and our recommendations. So when you've had hearings and you've consulted, as far as you know, you've gone all over the country, 9 provinces, and when you had the preliminary report, you then went also around the country where you were having public meetings where everyone was invited, where umbrella organizations were invited, where individual pastors and prophets were invited, and people made their recommendations and to say, maybe you should do this, maybe you should do that. If you look at our report, all the stuff that people raised with us, we responded to those issues. So we did not ignore it when people like Freedom of Religion South Africa came to us and said, change this, change that, change that. Part of what they were saying was that ditch all your recommendations. We responded to all of that. Part of what they were saying was, you are against homeschooling. When we raised the issue that children were not going to school in Ngcobo with the 7 Angels, Freedom of Religion South Africa, and the majority of those people who ended in Parliament in October, they were saying to us, we're anti-homeschooling. All we're saying is that there was no homeschooling there. No one was doing anything. They were singing and dancing the whole day. And part of what they've declared is that we're against homeschooling. We've had a lot of people who complained here being driven by Freedom of Religion South Africa to say, go and complain there, they want to shut down homeschooling. You can't compare what happens in my home when I determine that I don't want my kids to go to a normal school and I'm starting my own school in my own yard with the craziness that was happening there. So indirectly they were saying we're attacking the people in the Seven Angels Ministry for keeping children at home. We then did everything that we're supposed to do. All we're saying is that our expectations were that Parliament will move with the speed that this deserves, because we had told them things are burning out there. And because they didn't move with the speed, we have a right to say we've done what we needed to do. We left it with them as constitutionally mandated. And as our Act says, if you look at those parts that we've highlighted, it says you can make a recommendation to the relevant organ of state for legislation. We did that. And what we're saying is that it's with them. It's not with us. But one thing we can assure you, if there had been legislation, it wouldn't have come to this. If legislation had been passed soon enough, early enough, this would not have happened. But what happened was that Forza and them were given a second bite to say, in spite of all your responses to them, come and listen to them again. And they'll tell you what it is that they don't like with your recommendations. And the final thing was, go and call a big conference now and listen to them again. And that's why we're saying maybe the Constitutional Court can then give clarity on these issues for us. When we said we left it there, it was with the full understanding of the Constitution. So his views are unfortunate. And, you know, they border on something else when you say, unfortunately, the chairperson of the CRL Rights Commission does not understand the role of Parliament. They cannot give instructions to Parliament. If we're giving instructions to Parliament, we would have followed a different route. We would have been saying to them, so why are you calling us to another round now? It's because we know we can't instruct Parliament. We can only pray and hope that they'll move fast enough to protect the masses out there. But we can't make them do anything. That we're very clear about. And that's why we're sitting here today, waiting still. And that's why the whole nation is waiting still, because you can't force Parliament to do anything. And then the issue of, have you ever felt this powerless after making recommendations? I must tell you, never, ever before. Even in our wildest dreams, we never thought we'll reach a stage where Parliament nullifies every recommendation we've made on such an important matter. The Portfolio Committee has practically said, we totally disagree with you on everything, in spite of the fact that you've studied this thing. And I dare say, with the commissioners here, I don't think anyone knows what is happening in the Christian sector, especially, more than we do. We are a walking volume of the realities out there. We know more than millions of people know about what is happening out there. So when we made recommendations that were thought through over months of deliberation, months of debates within the commission, exhausting consultations with experts in the Constitution, we thought we had an answer that was safe, that could move forward. We honestly went with the recommendations thinking they'll be embraced. But I think the lobbyists proved to us that they can, do better than we can ever hope. So when lobbyists and their skills to lobby parliamentarians get to a stage where, after years of work, and to say what is even more painful, this has been an extremely dangerous process. It's not a safe process. Some of us need bodyguards. We've got people we've had to take to court. One of them, because he did put his name down, is serving 3 years in jail because of the threats. So the issue of threats is not just a pipe dream of ours that we think, yeah, well, we just want to play big and whatever. We took unbelievable risks with these commissioners here. We went into places where nobody else would go to. We questioned people who have never been questioned before. The religious sector has never been questioned before. Of course, people will object, who are you to come and ask us questions? Their lobbyists will lobby Parliament every day. They're there every day, going up and down, telling parliamentarians that these people are out of order, bombarding them with emails every day, changing their minds to make sure that they side with them on this issue. So it has never happened before that we're faced with such as the CRL Commission. We've spent a lot of time doing this work. When we said the angels were a danger, it wasn't just a flippant thing that we came to. We studied them. We went there. We knew what was happening. We knew where they were. We knew that the end was near, since the money was going to run dry. But nobody listened. So yes, we feel extremely powerless right now. We feel we can't do what the Constitution asks us to do, protect the rights of religious communities. We feel we're disempowered. We feel we are lost, basically, that how then do you implement your constitutional mandate when you've got such a report from a portfolio committee that you must now implement? And it's not taking you where you feel the country ought to go to. And we're at in a situation where, there's trouble, this thing can't go on. If people say we can regulate ourselves, that there'll be no effective regulation if they suddenly say, No, we can do this, leave us alone. They haven't done it over 20 years. Why should we believe them when they say now they're ready to take on this thing? What mandates them legally? We all don't know. Do we know any similar churches? That's why I was saying we're asking you to ask the communities out there to indicate that if you were monitoring in Limpopo, we're still going to go there. We've received a few indications that there are villages in Limpopo too where these things might be happening. We believe there are more and more of these things that are happening somewhere else. And most of the time we've relied on the media to bring in the stories where these things were happening. As we said, with the angels were alerted by the SABC, an SABC program that flighted the situation there. We're asking the media to be vigilant as well. We're asking communities to be vigilant as well. And we know they're not a once-off. That we know for a fact. And we're now going into a situation where we need to be chasing after those churches. We need to be looking at, with the current situation, which laws are they breaking, if any. If none of the laws are there that they are breaking, we're all going to just pray and hope that nothing happens. So yes, we feel powerless. Yes, we feel useless. Yes, we feel marginalized. Yes, we feel this is the end of the road for us.
Thanks, Chair. Can I get an indication of further questions? Or? Okay, I see there's one here. Any other one? Otherwise, we are going to wrap. Okay. Can I get, yes,
Thank you. I'm not here for questions. I'm here to try and be part of the solution. So I'm from the Gospel Music Association of South Africa, and we've supported this work from the inception, and I speak as a Christian also, because I think what's going on here, we're playing games with people's lives, and I'm sure some of us in some quarters will not be liked because of people like personalizing stuff. I find in my observation, or in our observation as an organization, that people tend to focus on the chair of the CRL Commission rather than to focus on the work, the very important work of this commission. And may I dare say that religion and politics cause wars. We've seen it happen, and people must not underestimate the work of this commission, how important it is in building this nation going forward. I mean, our role will be to mobilize artists, particularly gospel artists, because we hold a special interest in this sector. You know, nobody wants the proud environment that you thrive in to always be a question of doubt, people commenting about your faith, and to say, it's actually better not to go to church rather to be in church when stuff like this happen in church. I mean, people died in Ngcobo, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. And we need to take this work seriously. And I'm actually disappointed in Parliament's comments, and we've seen that Parliament has been found wanting. And we need to say it openly. I mean, Tulima Donzel had to go to court for her to be taken seriously. So what's happening now, where we are now with CRL, it reminds me of that, when her recommendations were never ever taken seriously. And look at where they landed the previous leaders of the previous administration. And if we are saying we are hopeful in moving forward as a nation, we need to be honest with ourselves and stop playing politics, because people's lives are at stake. And the religious sector, particularly Christian faith that I'm coming from, should be respected and have credibility to a point where leaders in politics can come for advices from religious leaders. We have to be trusted with everything. So if you find that the church is not being trusted and people who murder people come from the church, it's a problem. And I think we finally and confront the situation. And I'm saying from the Gospel Music Association side, we are supporting CRL to take this, to test this in the Constitution so that we can actually know where we are standing, because money is being wasted. If we're talking about taxpayers' money here, and then why are we having the CRL? And I agree with the chair. Then we might as well close shop and go home. So, and thank you very much. But in closing, I want to say that we need to dare chair our sector to say, let's go and talk again. Maybe this time it should not be led by the CRL Commission, because of people have become too personal with the chair. So we will take up the challenge to call for a symposium, to call all our leaders. I'm not a religious leader. I take huge interest, but I'm a Christian. And say, talk about this thing without Tobom corners, without CRL. And then let's find a solution so that this country can move forward. Thank you very much.
I think we are moving towards concluding this part of the briefing. Chair, you can give your concluding remarks, because I don't seem to be having any further question.
Okay, I think maybe I should deal with the issue that Tebuko raised, the issue of focus on the chairperson. I think there's currently an SMS or whatever you call it from some apostle who has decided to have a personal attack on me as a person, and I feel that's why my life is perpetually at risk. The state security people and the police have said that I'm at high risk because people deal with me as a person and not with me as part of the CRL Commission. I think it makes for good publicity on their parts when they deal with an individual than an institution. So it has its own risks. And whenever we've been saying anything, the rest of the commissioners have always been part of it, and whatever we've always done as a collective. And for some reason, especially people in the religious sector, pastors, apostles, prophets, have always been very personal about it. I've had to take a protection order against one of the prophets because it was getting totally out of hand. And fortunately, at least I've got a 5-year protection order. I've got 5 years to breathe with him not mentioning my name in vain at any time. When you have to take a protection order against a prophet, you must know, as a nation, we are in trouble. When the court says to you, yes, we are in danger because of this man, is inciting his people to come after you. We've had to lay criminal charges against the same prophet for inciting congregants against me in person. And it has become untenable, but I guess it comes with the territory. At some point, you need to have a very strong disposition or mind to face this thing. But for some of us, this is not just about who wins and who loses. We expect that the religious communities will win the battle at the end of the day. And I think the Commissioner wants to say something on that as well.
There's also a question from Ish as a follow-up.
Oh.
Chair, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to make one point apropos what the question about the very personalized attack, systemic and systematic attacks on our chairperson. As we sit here, there are only 2 of our commissioners that are not present. We had a very intensive discussion again yesterday on everything which has flowed, all the documentation and the presentation. And we are very distressed that the outcome is what it is. This commission, which we have been serving all of for at least 4 years, if not longer, has got a very important and a key mandate in this country. And our experience is that our chairperson has led it with impeccable integrity and consistency and fairness as well. And we take serious offense at the personalized nature of the attacks on her. We reject them because they are not part of the discourse and they shouldn't be part of the discourse. and we have every confidence in this leadership of this commission, and we believe that the way it's been set out to you today, that will take its course, and in the process we will be looking forward to supporting our leadership, specifically our chairperson as well now, and making sure that we can try and meet the obligations that are placed on us by the Constitution, not by Parliament or whatever, by the Constitution. And that is our lodestar, that is our guiding star, and that's what we are about. And our leader, our chairperson, sets the example in terms of how that should be done and conducted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Let's get the last question from Ish, then we will conclude.
Chair, just for clarity, when then are you planning to approach the Constitutional Court?
Okay, as we said, the lawyers are drafting the papers and then we'll queue up, immediately thereafter. So we're hoping in like 2 weeks' time that the papers will be done, and then when it will be dealt with, that the Constitutional Court is out of our hands.
Well, with that, thanks, Chairperson, thanks, Commissioners, thanks, colleagues. We are now concluding this press briefing. Thank you. I know that there might be some of you who probably might want to do one-on-ones. The chairperson will be available outside.
Well done, Chair.
No, thanks.
Well done.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Huh?
There's a point where you make
By like the right time. So loud, I always tell you.